Okay, very good morning and a warm welcome everyone to today's talk. Thrilled to introduce Dr. Dev Pathak as our guest speaker this morning. Pathak is one leading sociologists in India today, teaches at the South Asian University in New Delhi. Dev's research interests include performative expressions, cultural politics in South Asia. He has a range of publications, but two of his most significant books are in the defense of the ordinary, which we discussed a couple of years back here, as well as Living and Dying, Meanings in Maithili Folklore. It deserves special mention. Presently, he is also the editor-in-chief of the journal Society and Culture in South Asia. A very warm welcome to you, Dev. We're absolutely delighted to have you here, and we're totally looking forward to this lecture on the Behrupiya community this morning. So over to you, Dev.
Very generous introduction. Sometimes that feels still fine. Generous introduction. Can you hear me, everyone? Slightly habitual of speaking softly. This hidden in the background. It for you to raise your hand if you can't hear me. I'll try to slowly mingle. Come closer to you, you can come closer to me and we can become one. That's not my problem. I'm sure you have gone through some of the basics about the keywords that I'm playing with here. One keyword is, of course, community. It's at the top of our mind, following the course curriculum. The other is identity, and the third is religion, religiosity. And I try to see them all intermingled and enmeshed, rather than separated from each other, one another. They all seem to be enmeshed by discussion, and I have deliberately kept them enmeshed, interlinked, so as the argument comes out sharp. There are two broader scenarios in which this kind of discussion becomes relevant. One is a scenario with which all of us are more or less acquainted. It's part of our everyday life. It's a scenario that can be characterized by innocence and politics. It's a cultural, civilizational scenario in which we have heard songs, stories, tales, traditional, non-traditional, popular, hybrid, global, authentic, non-authentic, doesn't matter, all sorts of things. It is in that scenario that your generation is also hooked up to the idea of K-pop. It's so open, the boundaries are so relaxed in this particular context that you do not mind receiving texts from all sides. Right? In spite of the fact that there are very significant geopolitical boundaries, those texts, those influences, those ideas keep coming to you, and you're receiving them in some way or other. That scenario has become quite advanced. I'm using the characteristic of innocence because we feel that we are innocently into it, but actually we are in some way or other partner in the larger game plan without knowing at times. And often when we get into the professions of various kinds, we know those game plans and yet we are there. It's in that scenario that we have an extension of this consumer society where we are also consuming some of this stuff very innocently, thinking that they are coming to us from all sides and they are very upmarketed, they are cutting edge, they are progressive, they are advanced, so on and so forth. That's one scenario. It's a civilizational context. Civilizational is in continuity. It is moving forward, no matter how much we try to keep in our mind that, this is not ours, this is theirs, this is ours, we should celebrate this, not that. Even then, they keep coming to us and we are consuming them, we are receiving them, we are accepting them, we are embracing them. They become part of our everyday life. Just like at some point of time, folk tales of various kinds were part of our everyday life. These days, I'm beginning to hear from folklore scholars that folklores have metamorphosed, they have transformed, and they have become part of the meaning that we consume, that we see from our gadgets, social media, all kind of small video clips. They all have become some sort of folklore of our time. So it is one of that context where we are receiving them, either as consumer, innocent consumer, or willful consumer, or as people who are ready to get inspired for various kind of reasons. That's one context, which is like eternal. It's been like this with humans. They have received ideas. The other context is of the first context also has its own politics. That's why I said innocence in politics. There is a cultural politics entailed in everything innocent that we do. When a mother sings a song, lullaby, mother would not think the child, of course not, the infant would not have that sense that there is some sort of politics in the background. But every bit of lullaby is part of some kind of cultural politics, and politics is not such a bad thing. That also has to be corrected by the individual. One of the finer sensibilities expressed is and if you do not trust me, you can very safely go to any of those Greco-Roman traditions of thought, and you would find some vindication for this idea that politics is, as it appears these days, that is a bad idea. Very recently, before I came here, one of my, these days all the uncles have become very vocal, very articulate, and they keep giving unsolicited advice. So I was reminded once again, this advice has been coming to me and to many of us. Stay away from politics. It's not a good thing for you. You're a scholar, you stay away from politics. This is very recent, it seems. It seems in the last 20, 30 years, this kind of idea has become very prevalent. But there is some kind of cultural politics entailed in that civilizational matrix, in that civilizational flow too. It's just that at times we get to recognize, and often we do not recognize it. So mother's lullaby may be part of larger cultural politics. The stories that we hear since childhood, the stories that we get to read, the kind of storybooks children get to read, they all may be part of the larger, some kind of civilizational flow-based game plan, and that is why cultural politics cannot be denied. Second scenario has some other kind of politics. It's a cultural nationalism-based politics. So in this scenario, the reason why I am giving this scenario a little clearer, so it's related to our discussion of community. The second one is of cultural nationalism, in which all those resources which were taken innocently earlier are taken more consciously, taken up more consciously for developing certain kind of agenda, certain kind of vision of society. It's not visionless. It does have certain vision with which you or I may disagree, but then there is a vision involved. It's in that cultural nationalism scenario where again we find some of these materials are played out to us, and we receive them willingly, we receive them, we happily enjoy, we try to forward, spread it out as much as possible. It is these two scenarios it becomes very important for us to think of the idea of community slightly differently. Why differently? What differently means here? It means basically that definitional understanding of community, identity, religiosity is not helping us. We are not enabled by those definitional understandings to get to where it is headed, how fast it's become, how it is packaged, how it comes to us, what is considered identity assertion today, why is it an identity assertion and not some other kind of assertion. All these questions do not get answered if we do not shift our attention from the definitional idea. You look at any dictionary of social sciences, encyclopedia of social sciences, even though they try to provide you with some kind of definition, they also mention it very clearly that it is difficult to define some of these terms, right? And there is a historical reason behind this kind of inability to give a categorical definition of some of these terms. The definition which will hold true across ages, societies, is very difficult to hand over such idea. Why? Because ultimately, in civilizational matrix as well as in the second scenario of cultural nationalism, one cannot deny a particular kind of expression which I would try to propose has been an eternal expression of mankind as far as community and identity is concerned. And what is that assertion? Assertion to be identityless. Assertion of an aspiration to be identityless, to be communityless. In modern, the first scenario when I was talking about different kind of materials, I was basically referring to a vernacular context where in everyday life you are receiving all sorts of entertaining, preaching ideas. So in that vernacular context, even in modern times, we have heard of this kind of articulations to go beyond the definitional idea of community and identity. And one of the examples which I borrowed from Dr. Basu's office, one of the examples in modern expression was given by a poetess called Amrita Pritham. She wrote in Punjabi originally. This poem was written in Punjabi originally. I'm reading out a translation for you. Just to reiterate, it's been borrowed from Basu's office. The poem goes like this. Today I have erased the number of my house. It's a slightly polished version of translation, which means that the Punjabi connotations have been, the intricate Punjabi connotations have been removed here. Today I have erased the number of my house and removed the stain of identity from my street's forehead. Again. Today I have erased the number of my house and removed the stain of identity from my street's forehead, and I have wiped off the directions on each road. But if you really want to meet me, the perennial anxiety, if I do all those things above said, then the perennial anxiety is that my friends, my family members, my kin and kin would not even find me. So, but if you really want to meet me, then knock at the doors of every country, every city, every street. But if you really want to meet me, then knock at the doors of every country, every city, every street. And wherever the glimpse of a free spirit exists, free spirit to be underlined. And wherever the glimpse of a free spirit exists, that will be my home. Right? This is in modern poetry, modern Punjabi poetry, written by Amrita Pritham. It's been translated variously by various translators. But more or less, this message is this, that one wants to get away from, depart from, typically definitional feature of who one is. This question, who am I? This is a question which has been asked in modern times as well as before modern times. Sufis ask this question. You hear this question again and again in some of those Sufi qawwalis sung by different gharanas in South Asia. Sufis ask this question, ancient philosophers ask this question. Now, why have they been asking this question? And then this modern poet is asking the same question. He's trying to suggest who is this person. Can this person be fixed into some of these very clearly defined brackets of community, identity, religiosity, or there is something more? There is more urge, in spite of the fact that my Aadhaar card would give you very clear idea, very definitionally correct idea of who am I know that I am not only that much. Right? I know that there is more aspiration as far as an answer to this question, who am I, is concerned. And that is with everyone, isn't it? It's ubiquitous. It's very ordinary aspiration. You talk to people, if you shift from the scenario of cultural nationalism, you immediately get to this, who am I business, right? As a result, you would find that everybody is on a move. The mobility increases because of the velocity of this question. Mobility would not have been possible if this question was not alive. The search for self, the quest of self, this has haunted modern psychoanalysts, philosophers, thinkers, modern civilization, as well as pre-modern, ancient, medieval. Then how can we forget this when we are discussing the idea of community today? This has to be kept alive. And that is the reason why I turn to vernacular context and I find this particular community of artists who try to, in spite of all the odds, one cannot say that this quest would be a simple, linear, romantic quest of self. It's a quest challenged by all kind of forces. The first challenge to this quest happened with the first ever census conducted by the British government. There is a scholar called Bernard Cohn. Is there a reading? Bernard Cohn?
Yes, it was like Cohn's village.
Okay. Bernard Cohn tried to show us very brilliantly that with census was a concrete expression of the power to conduct an epistemological conquest of the colony. To know the community fully well meant to rule the country, to rule the community fully well. So it was an epistemological conquest of the colonial communities, right? And therefore, it is through census that all the communities which were very fuzzy in nature, fuzzy in the sense that their boundaries were not fixed. There were a lot of intermingling. That's why I said, little bit I will mingle and little bit you will mingle and will become one. So there was constant, because of this fuzziness, there was constant mingling, give and take from one another. Only roots did not matter, R-O-O-T-S, roots. You will hear all the time that, pay respect to your roots. Only roots did not matter with the fuzzy communities. Also roots matter, R-O-U-T-E-S, roots. So on one hand, if there was respect for roots, R-O-O-T-S, there was this constant desire to be en route to somewhere else, right? So this coming together of roots and roots is very important. So with this census, all the fuzzy communities were enumerated. They were given names. They were given clear identification. In what sense? They were given clear location that this community lives there and they operate from there. And they have these kind of fixed knowledge, and they have these kind of fixed practices. This community, the other community lives there, over there, in the south of India, in the north of India, east and west, two separate twine. That was a European imagination of locating a community, right? This is the identity assertion of this community, that is identity assertion of that community. This kind of separation was also necessary for the statecraft, modern statecraft. So it was achieved, right? But was it possible to vanquish fuzziness altogether? In spite of census, was it possible to vanquish that fuzziness? That answer does not come very clearly from Bernard. That answer comes from some of the wayward anthropologists. I say wayward because they were too creative. One of them was James Scott, known to be an anarchist anthropologist. Very word anarchist. These days, nobody would say I'm an anarchist. No thinker, no sociologist, certainly not political leadership. Anarchy is a bad word. And just like Paul Feyerabend in science, James Scott in anthropology happened to be an anarchist. And he helped us understand that no matter how much you know about the community, it is very much possible that you know of that community through their official transcript, the public transcript, the transcript, that cultural transcript that they offer for public. They say that, sir, we are this, we are that, we do this kind of thing. We go to that temple, that institute, that mosque, we worship there. Our priests are only these people, not those people. They will give you this public transcript. And based on that public transcript, we may derive our conclusive understanding that this is the community. This is what this community is about. But then, James Scott helps us understand that there is also a hidden transcript with every community. And it is in that hidden transcript that they perform, each community performs subversion of their own identity. Subversion in what sense? That they seek something beyond their own identifications. They try to find something more than what is known to the world about themselves. Right? So these kind of ideas have been there even in modern anthropology. Modern anthropology is not deprived of this kind of realization. But then somehow, because we have to write our answers, our essays correctly, we stick to the clear-cut definitions. And that way we begin to compromise on the broader connotations, broader meanings of some of these words. This was also necessity for the modern societies. Some of the thinkers, this is a typical practice to start with thinkers and then come to the empirical part. So some of the thinkers helped us understand that, modern societies were so besotted with grand narratives, and it's not dead yet. Our love for grand narrative is still alive, and that is the reason why we love watching RRR. It's a grand narrative, and likewise other kind of popular narratives. These are grand narratives. It gives you a grand tale about our struggle, collective struggle, right? Grand narratives are still popular with political leadership. Okay? Any political leadership, no matter which one, according to your preference, you can decide. Any political leadership would like to project a grand narrative. This is how I present the holistic progress, so on and so forth. So we have, it's the long-lasting phase of grand narratives. But some of the thinkers helped us understand critically the limitations of grand narratives. Right? Someone like Leotard, John Leotard, someone like Zygmunt Bauman, they helped us understand that beneath all these grand narratives, there are discrete narratives. There are those narratives which are not following the definitional idea of community. Those discrete narratives belonged to the experiential trope of some of these communities, about whom we may have already written in various encyclopedia, in dictionary, in our scholarly pieces. But then there are multiple those discrete narratives underneath these grand narratives yet to be explored. And that is why we had in Global South something called subaltern historiography, taken as a necessary enterprise to explore these discrete narratives. Go beyond the grand narrative. Not to say that grand narrative was not important. It is important for the stability of society. Post-French Revolution, the social science, modern social science emerges post-French Revolution. And this was a primary objective of modern social sciences post-French Revolution, to develop a grand narrative which will provide with stability in society. So the functional value, utility of grand narrative cannot be denied. Is it too much?
Yeah.
But then one cannot also deny discrete stories. I mean, I can give you a very big lecture, but I can never deny, and maybe very limiting, very difficult to judge though, very arresting big lecture. But then, as an audience, listening to those big lectures, it's very interesting, very towering speaker, and each in the audience would be simultaneously developing a discrete narrative, a discrete lecture, some kind of footnotes. Each footnote will be equally important. So this quest of discrete narrative is like quest of those significant footnotes of the audience, right? So the whole bunch of communities for audience to grab narrative, and yet their discrete narrative did not cease to exist. They were continually flourishing, and it was left to some new brand of scholarship to take note of those discrete narratives. If we take note of those discrete narratives, it becomes even more difficult to stay complacent with the definitional ideas of community and identity. Following a grand narrative, Bihu is anybody from Assam here? No. Nobody from Assam. Bihu is a national festival, which is originally a Ahomia folk festival, and Ahomia folk festival which will find different kind of articulation depending on the part of Assam you are looking at. But then when it becomes a national festival, all those discreteness are erased, removed, and then it becomes a national festival. Bihu is supposed to be very erotic folk festival, extremely erotic in their songs, in their dance moves, everything. It's a festival. If you watch in the village, the performance, if you watch in a village, even though you are a cold-hearted person, you fall in love with someone. It's that moving. Right? But then, if you watch any of those staged for wider audiences, staged Bihu performance for wider national, international audience, you will not find the sign of eroticism. Erotica is removed. That erotica is part of discrete narrative, which is still there if you go and watch those folks, right? You would still hear that eroticism in the songs, Bihu songs, but they would not come to join the larger panorama of grand narrative. Grand narrative cannot tolerate this kind of uniqueness. So the major challenge to the definitional idea of community, identity, religiosity is basically this one word which became very popular in 1980s. That one word is difference. Right? While grand narrative was a concerted way to develop, I'm not using the word manufacture because that is in the media studies later on you guys started using. But grand narrative was to develop, it was aimed at developing consensus. Consensus, Amar Shunar Namla, there should not be any difference in accepting this. So consensus for that. Likewise, consensus for the pride for larger nationhood. In spite of the fact that Rabindranath Tagore wrote a very scathing critique of nationalism right so early on, right? But grand narrative would have that collective, concerted move to develop this kind of consensus, which is fairly important. Nobody can deny it. Just like nobody can deny the importance of grand social science post French Revolution. It pays well. It is useful for society. Likewise, one cannot deny the importance of this kind of grand narrative. But just because this grand narrative is in existence, because it is serving nation, society, it doesn't mean that other kind of narratives are not equally important. Other kind of narratives have this element of difference, even though, so Bauman would say that, something very interesting, that all those who loved modern nation state, they tried to sweep under the carpet everything which was grotesque, bizarre, which did not fit the framework of modernity. They swept them all under the carpet. Those elements which were swept under the carpet, those grotesque, those bizarre elements, those bizarre traits, they did not die under the carpet, interestingly, right? They were very different kind of amoeba. They metamorphosed, almost like Kafkaesque metamorphosis. They metamorphosed into different kind of monsters, and they started coming out of, at their own will, they started coming out of those carpets. And they are the major threats to modernity all over the world. So, Bauman would go to the extent of suggesting that terrorism was one of those kind of, terrorism is this metamorphosed difference which was swept under the carpet. Right? When difference is ignored, it doesn't mean that difference dies. Difference nourishes itself on its own material, and it may come out in such a form that you would think that this is probably some new kind of monster, but it was in a very small form already there when you swept them under the when you hid them behind a closet. So they start coming out, tumbling down from the closets. So this is the situation. This is the situation in which I try to propose that to make sense of community and identity in non-reductionist manner. While grand narratives would prefer slightly reductionist manner, just like Bernard Cohn says that the census tries to reduce a community into a figure, identity into few traits, right? Recognizable traits, empirically verifiable traits. This may be suitable for some people who have interest in stability, all of us have, and some kind of statecraft. But then it doesn't mean that difference dies away, difference stays on. In taking into account that element of difference, one has to start looking at some of these communities which are still in the process of getting enumerated. Behrupiya is an artist's community which is still in the process of getting enumerated. Thinking of some of these communities very early on, one of the first generation sociologists in India named Radhakamal Mukherjee, first generation, during the British time, right, who is known to be a pioneer of Lucknow School of Sociology, though T. N. Madan says that there is no such thing called Lucknow School of Sociology. Madan was a student of some of these pioneers. So Radhakamal Mukherjee very early on wrote a book on art and social structure, which is considered to be an exceptional work. That kind of work did not come from any other sociologist. Much later we hear of Roma Chatterjee working on these kind of things. So Radhakamal Mukherjee tried to show us that if you want to understand society in the South Asian context, you have to understand it through some of these communities of artists and through their artworks, because it is through their artworks and it is through the community of these artists you get a sense of some of these keywords such as identity, community, religiosity. You get a sense of some of these keywords in a larger civilizational context, not only in the context of statecraft, not only in the context of grand narrative, not only in the context of certain kind of fixed agenda. You begin to understand these words in the larger civilizational context. And civilization is not something static, it is always on move. It is so much on move that it gets very difficult to, at times very difficult to recognize which one is authentic and which one is impure, corruption, pollution, influence from outside, right? So Radhakamal Mukherjee is a very important figure for anybody who tries to understand society through the art of society, right? Likewise, I should also, before I move on to talk about Behrupiya, I should also quickly mention that there is this perennial anxiety amongst us, and it has been fed a lot of fuel by various kind of stakeholders, various kind of vested interest. And the anxiety is to find out our authentic self. What is more authentic? In this search for authenticity, we tend to suggest that anything traditional is more authentic. But the point is whether tradition was itself static, right? Tradition itself has been on move, and as a result, this quest of authenticity becomes some kind of red herring, some kind of distraction, rather than really an intellectual approach to understand something. It becomes some kind of distraction. In this regard, and this is the last thing I'll say, and then I will move to Behrupiya. In this regard, I always remember a grand folklorist from India who taught all his life in America, but made a lot of our folklore accessible to English-speaking world. His name is A.K. Ramanujan. Have you heard of his name? A.K. Ramanujan. And A.K. Ramanujan used to, on this question of what is authentic, whether tradition is authentic or not, which community is more rooted, which is less rooted, which practice is more purer than the other. On these kind of anxious questions, Ramanujan used to have an answer, which was basically a Kannada folk tale. Anybody who speaks Kannada here? No? So there is a Kannada, very small Kannada folk tale, which was his answer to his question. And with that answer, we'll move on. So the folk tale goes like, the tale goes like this. There was a erudite philosopher, expert on antiquities, ancient stuff, the authentic ancient artifacts. And this philosopher knew about authentic artifacts very well. And he was in the practice of appropriating, taking them, borrowing them from everywhere and keeping them in his personal museum and write about them and introduce the whole world to these authentic materials. So once he got to know, this philosopher got to know about an ancient sickle. Sickle, you understand? Sickle, S-I-C-K-L-E, sickle. Yes, yes. Yes, that's sickle. On the various flags you might have seen sickle. Sickle is used for cutting this meat and rice paddy. So he got to know that there is this very ignorant farmer who is in possession of this ancient, authentic, traditional, real sickle, which was passed down from generation to generation. It's almost like this sickle is almost a metaphor for folklore, right? So this has been passed down from generation to generation, and now this ignorant farmer is using this authentic sickle. So this authentic sickle must be rescued from the ignorance of this farmer. So this philosopher undertook an arduous journey, village after village, town after town. He walked, and he reached the door of the house of this ignorant farmer, and asked him, "I have heard that from my sources that you have this ancient sickle." Farmer said, "Yes, I have. Show me. I am this and this. I have so many certificates, so many awards, like one of us. So I am the right person to get to know about the sickle. Show me that sickle, and you must hand it over to me. I would take it to my place and I'll write about it." So farmer dutifully went inside. What to do? Big person at the door. So he went inside and he brought the sickle and handed it over to the philosopher. The sickle was brand new. The philosopher was aghast. "Are you fooling me? You are giving me some other new sickle you have purchased recently from the market? Where is that real, authentic sickle?" The farmer said, "No, sir, this is the authentic sickle, trust me. The only thing is that this blade, you see, I changed it a few times. The old one was blunt. And this wooden handle, you see, I also changed that. The earlier one was broken. But it is the same sickle. Trust me." This was the answer A.K. Ramanujan always had for anybody who was in the quest of authentic community artifact. Right? And all these things that I have said just now, they will come to characterize this particular community I am referring to. Have you heard of Behrupias? A lot of people don't know Behrupias. When we were children growing up in small towns, and even now in Delhi also I see Behrupias. Not everywhere, because they are constantly under policy radar. Behrupias became dubious characters ever since 1857 in South Asia. Why 1857? Because Behrupias along with Tawayas played very important role in the 1857 revolution, or as British history says, mutiny. They were the conduits, you understand, messengers. There was no WhatsApp, no, they were the WhatsApp of that time. They used to pass information about revolutionary. So this revolutionary is going to hide here this night. One has to provide something. So Behrupiya became major suspect in 1857. As a result, after 1857, we see a series of criminalization of communities that happens in British India. They are still partially criminalized. As a result, anybody from Kanpur here or Uttar Pradesh here? No. Are you from Uttar Pradesh? Kanpur.
Allahabad.
Allahabad. So Kanpur, the city of Kanpur has a major settlement. It's called CTS. It's called CTS Basti. CTS, the letter CTS. It stands for Criminal Tribe Settlement Basti. Right? And several times, I often go to IIT Kanpur to deliver this kind of lectures. And several times I have requested my colleagues over there to take me to CTS. They scolded me. How can you even think of going to CTS? It's a bad place. It's a place where all the prostitutes live. It's a place where all the pickpockets live. They'll murder you in the daylight. They'll rob you off. You'll never be able to come out of that. It's a black hole. Don't go there. Then I thought I should talk to one of these auto rickshawalas. I told them, take me to CTS. And you're looking like a nice person. How can you go to CTS? I'll not take it. I've been denied this opportunity to go to CTS several times. There will be a few videos about CTS on YouTube, which will basically tell you as to how police has reformed the dwellers of the CTS, criminal tribe settlement. A lot of Behrupiyas till date live there. And they are considered partially criminal people, quasi-criminals. Right? They are not trustworthy. If they have to go to any part of India to perform their act, wherever they go, the first thing they are supposed to do is to go to the police station or place and inform the police that, we are these people, we have come from this place and we are going to stay here for these many days and perform our acts. Right? So they are still partially criminalized communities. Right? Interesting, no? And we have literally grown up watching these Behrupiyas. They will come in the vesh, they call it vesh. The disguise is called vesh, the vesh of Kali, on Kali. They will start roaming around as Hanuman on certain kind of occasions, as Shiva on certain occasions. So, following the calendar of festivities, they decide their vesh. They also become jinn, go around, giving you very contemporary message. They will pass comments about the power to be, the regime in power, right? One of the Behrupiyas, who happens to be my friend, informer, whatever you call, performed on the arrival of Donald Trump. They were all invited to perform in front of Trump. So one of them had become Trump. Till date, he tries to talk like Trump, even though Trump is gone away, and he will come back soon. I'm sure he will come back soon. So this particular Shamshad, his name is Shamshad. A lot of these Behrupiyas from Rajasthan are Muslim by faith, right? Their forefathers, like Shamshad's father's name was Shivrati, a version of Shivrati. Why? Because he was born on a Mahashivratri day. Muslim by faith with Hindu name and performing all the Hindu gods and goddesses, all the Hindu characters across India. You see how difficult it becomes for people to put them in a bracket, right? And if you talk to them, and they work very hard on their costume, it's almost like preparing costume for Ramlila performance. A lot of these Behrupiyas also perform roles in Ramlilas. When you see Ramlila, have you seen any Ramlila? No. Okay. Post-millennium limitations. So a lot of these Ramlila actors are not very rich people, very emaciated, haggard, malnourished. You will see malnourished malnourished actors playing Sita, malnourished Ram. It's not like Adipurush, Prabhas kind of Ram. They're very real Ram. with whom you can identify because you're also real humans and you instantly find some kind of relation with them. Anyway, so some of these Behrupias also perform in Ram Leela. Now the point is that when you talk to them about their faith, about their community, they were traditionally nomadic community. They didn't have a fixed settled area. If you go by the dictionary meaning of the word community, it requires a community to have a fixed location, right? It can't be a community without fixed location. Whereas this community didn't have fixed location, right? For a very long time. It is only in the last 20 years that they have decided to settle down at one place somewhere because it's getting really difficult. And they have also lost their old patronage, so it's getting very difficult to maintain their nomadic life. And their kids are not interested in this traditional performance art. So kids have started going to school. They are not receiving the intergenerational knowledge of Behrupiya performance. Hence, the settlement has become important for them. With settlement, they also have the necessity to dikhao kagaz. Kagaz dikhao. The new requirement is to show on paper that you are this or that community, that you can be identified with this or that community. And that means that they are beginning to submit themselves to this need of getting enumerated. A fuzzy community getting slowly, steadily enumerated so as it can fit into census surveys so that it can be available for good administration. And in that light, if you see a video which is still there on YouTube, I'm very sure. Very recently, somebody sent to me of CTS. That video says that Kanpur police is successful in transforming this criminal community into very civilized. Now they have papers to show. Earlier they did not have any paper to show, and therefore they were more committed to crimes than ever before, so and so forth. In spite of this slow and steady enumeration of a fuzzy community, traditionally fuzzy community, they maintain fuzziness in their practices. For Muslim community, because they are Muslim by faith, for Muslim community they are pariahs, they are outsiders. Muslim community says that they perform the role of gods and goddesses. You're totally, what is that word? Kufr. This is kufr to go around performing, and so you are not one of us. So they are not devout 5 times namazis Muslims. They're not even once. They forget namaz, but they are very regular with the shrines of some local peer. So all their practices revolve around the shrines of local peer. So it's a Muslim community which is not fully Muslim. You see, it's a Muslim community with whom, whenever you start asking them about their performance art, they start with Sam Vedic time. They say that our ancestors existed in Sam Vedic. Sam Veda you have heard of, no? One of the 4 Vedas. Sam Veda was very different from Rig Veda. Rig Veda was dear to the Aryan Brahmins. It's still dear to Brahmins. All the Karma Kanda is in Rig Veda. Sam Veda was for the performers, singers, who went around in bullock cart, village after village, town after town, and they performed, and they were very subversive performers, right? The Vedic tradition needed Sam Vedic performers for their own benefit. They thought that the Rig Vedic ideas will be communicated by these Sam Vedic performers to the communities, and our Rig Veda will be popular. But the performers cannot be stopped, no? They cannot be civilized today, right? So some of these Behrupiyas take us back to Sam Vedic time, and then they will say that even though we try to discipline ourselves with this art, we cannot be fully disciplined. Why? Again, they will tell you a story that what Bharat, who wrote this Natya Shastra, Bharat was a sage. One of the earliest treatises on dramaturgy, on dance, on art, performance art, is this text called Natya Shastra, which has been translated by very many scholars. Manmohan Ghosh's translation is considered one of the best. right? So this Behrupiyas will start talking about the time of Natya Shastra, and they tell a very wonderful story about Natya Shastra, and that explains as to why they cannot be fully disciplined, in spite of the fact that they are getting slowly enumerated. They cannot be fully disciplined by this, regime of enumeration. And the story goes like this: that the first 100 people that Bharat trained in the performing art, after training those 100 disciples, the first act they performed, you know what that was? The first act they performed was to go around the monasteries of all these rishis and munis and ridicule them and disturb their penance. That was their first act. As a result, Brahma sent Narad, this is the story I have heard. Brahma sent Narad to communicate to Bharat that, what have you done? You have trained all these hooligans to perform something which is disturbing our Vedic practices. They're spoiling our civilization. So do something about it. So then Bharat had to cast a spell and make all these guys forget the skills of performance that they had learned. And then, so this story basically is told by Behrupiyas to help us understand that, in spite of all kind of possible ways of disciplining them, starting with 1857, moved to criminalize them, and now the necessity to enumerate themselves, no matter which regime we are referring to, the element of subversion will be always there in their performances. The element of fuzziness will always be there with this community, right? It will not die away. Some of the Behrupiyas are also Hindus, but they are lesser in numbers. Larger number are of Muslim faith. And because of this Muslim faith, they also give another story that their lineage is also to the Sufi saints who were themselves performers. Right? Their spirituality was not just inwardly felt spirituality, it was performed spirituality. And in the line of those spiritual, the Behrupiyas were known as bhans when they were disciples of those Sufi spiritual gurus, saints. So they also have this kind of. So you see, in various directions, the lineage of this community will go in various directions. And given that, it becomes very difficult to think of this community in the light of grand narrative, which gives you certain definitional idea of a community. They also have identity assertion. It's feeble, it's meek assertion. Of course, these kind of communities will have meek assertions. They are not as organized as other communities which have been enumerated for a very long time. Right? Identity assertion has this necessary requirement of being enumerated in official documents for a very long time, so that they can mobilize themselves as one person, one people, one community. This is also one community, but it does not have problem with the element of fragmentation which is within, the element of liquidness which will give fright to someone else is actually a matter of celebration in this community. We do not know what would happen with them tomorrow, but this is how they are right now. I think I have spoken for a very long time. I should expect some questions.
Thank you so much, Dev. I'm sure there will be most of the questions